Is JP Morgan and BlackRock secretly buying XRP? That's the million-dollar question echoing through the crypto community right now. Whispers of hidden accumulation, behind-the-scenes contracts, and major players positioning themselves for the next financial shift are everywhere. And with the first-ever spot XRP ETF now live, the timing couldn't be more perfect. In its very first day of trading, it shocked the market with unprecedented volume, sparking speculation that institutions aren't just interested, they're already moving in. This is not financial advice. Now, here's where things get really interesting. When you dig into the history, you find names like Robbie Mitnick and Susan I, two of the only people who ever did a true XRP valuation back in 2018. And what happens after that? Robbie goes on to BlackRock, the single largest asset manager in the world, removes his Ripple affiliation from LinkedIn, and suddenly pivots to talking only about Bitcoin.
If you believe for a second that's the end of his involvement with XRP, then I've got an igloo to sell you in South Georgia. It's clear there's more under the surface than what's being shown on the headlines. See, big institutions rarely show their hand. They talk about Bitcoin and Ethereum because that's what keeps the spotlight comfortable. But behind the curtain, where the real money moves, the conversation is different. They don't need retail FOMO piling into XRP just yet because that drives up their own entry price. Instead, they downplay, they distract, and they quietly accumulate. It's a strategy as old as markets themselves. Talk one thing, buy another. And this is exactly why I put together something special for serious investors. The XRP Millionaire Blueprint. Inside, you'll find a complete package with documents, infographics, and videos that lay out step-by-step strategies, the history of institutional moves, and key insights into how to position yourself intelligently. It's pinned in the comment below this video. Check it out if you're ready to level up your XRP knowledge and preparation. It could save you months of guesswork and help you connect the dots faster than most people in this space. Now let's go deeper into what's happening behind the curtain. When Ripple first set up its escrow system, releasing 1 billion XRP per month, the stated reason was transparency. But insiders always suspected there was more going on. And over time, evidence trickled out pre-allocation contracts. We know for a fact that R3 secured 5 billion XRP in an option deal. We know Greg Kidd locked in a 1% allocation of the total float. And here's the kicker. If those two entities were smart enough to arrange option contracts, do you really think they were the only ones? Does anyone really believe Bank of America, the IMF, or the BS didn't negotiate their own allocations? That's the kind of thinking that separates casual speculators from people who actually grasp the magnitude of what's happening. Remember, when institutions accumulate, they don't go to the open market like the rest of us. They use contracts, pre-allocations, and behind-the-scenes agreements. That's how they avoid slippage. That's how they maintain secrecy, and that's how they secure enormous positions without moving the price prematurely. Which means every time we see Ripple relocking 70% of those escrow releases, the question has to be asked, where is the rest going? If pre-allocation deals are already in place, then those flows might be spoken for before the market ever gets a chance to touch them. And that brings us back to the ETF. The very first spot, XRP ETF, launched by Rex Osprey, opened at $2,582 a share, and in just the first 90 minutes racked up over $24 million in trading volume. That's 5 times higher than any prior XRP futures ETF at launch. Wall Street analysts called the volume shockingly high. Investor attention wasn't on the Dogecoin ETF launched the same day, it was squarely on XRP. And when you see demand like this in a regulated product, it's a flashing signal that institutional investors want exposure. Think about what that means. For the first time in U.S. history, mainstream investors and big money managers have a clean, compliant gateway to XRP through a spot ETF. That's not a small milestone. That's a paradigm shift, because once one ETF is approved, the SEC will face pressure to approve others. If they don't, lawsuits will fly and competitors will demand access, which means October could turn into a domino effect of approvals, each one bringing in fresh waves of capital. And just when the ETF news was heating up, another announcement dropped. DBS Bank, Ripple, and Franklin Templeton entering a partnership. DBS is Asia's top financial institution with massive reach in credit lending and trading. Franklin Templeton is a global investment giant responsible for tokenizing their on-chain US dollar money market fund known as SG Benji directly on the XRP ledger. And Ripple is providing the infrastructure to make it all work. We're talking about direct integration into a $7.3 trillion market, money market funds alone. If XRP is the backbone of that connection, then this isn't just about remittances anymore. It's about becoming the rails for global liquidity itself. The XRP Millionaire Blueprint goes even deeper into these kinds of use cases, showing not just where the news is today, but how to track the partnerships, the flows, and the implications for the coming years. If you want to understand how a $7.3 trillion market could flow through the XRP ledger, it's all laid out in simple visual detail inside the blueprint. Again, the pinned comment has the link. Meanwhile, analysts are buzzing about what kind of capital inflows this market could see. Some call for $10 trillion entering crypto in the next cycle. And when liquidity is thin, like it is with XRP, even a relatively small inflow can have an outsized impact on price. That's why some estimates get thrown around. $8 billion in inflows pushing XRP to multi-trillion valuations. Now, whether or not those multipliers hold as liquidity deepens is another debate. But the important thing is this. Institutional money is coming, and XRP is positioned as a key liquidity asset in a global system where efficiency, speed, and interoperability are no longer optional. We're already seeing experiments beyond just finance. For example, real estate on the XRP ledger projects bringing 10,000 properties worth $2 billion in value on-chain. Now, ownership and titling is one thing, but the true market impact comes when mortgages, loans, and the value streams of these assets are tokenized directly on ledger. That's when the multiplier effect really kicks in, because we're no longer just talking about transactions. We're talking about unlocking the value of entire industries on top of XRP's infrastructure. And every step of the way, the big players are circling. They might not talk about it openly, but actions speak louder than words. Spot ETFs launching, trillion-dollar partnerships forming, and pre-allocation deals confirmed in the past. It all points to the same direction, a quiet but powerful accumulation. So the question you have to ask yourself isn't if institutions are getting in, it's when and how much. Because by the time they announce it, the positions are already secured, and the opportunity for retail to accumulate at today's levels will be gone. When you really zoom out on XRP's trajectory, you start to see how all of these puzzle pieces connect. Pre-allocation deals, institutional silence, spot ETFs, and major banks weaving themselves into the XRP ledger. It's a bigger story than just price action. It's about architecture, infrastructure, the rails of a new financial system being laid down while most people are still watching Bitcoin headlines. And that's the thing. Bitcoin and Ethereum dominate the narrative, but that doesn't mean they dominate the strategy. Institutions are brilliant at narrative control. They push the assets they want people distracted by while securing exposure to the ones that give them a true competitive edge. XRP has always been in that second category. Why? Because it's not designed to just sit in a portfolio like digital gold. It's designed to move money, to bridge currencies, to integrate with banks, payment providers, and entire markets. Think back to the lawsuit era when Ripple faced the SEC head-on. While retail investors panicked, something different was happening in the background. Ripple kept building, signing partnerships, and pushing forward. Meanwhile, billions in XRP kept moving in and out of escrow, often with no clear explanation for where it all ended up. That silence wasn't random. It was strategic. It gave Ripple cover to make deals that weren't ready for public eyes. And every month, as 70% of released XRP was relocked, the question remained, who is taking delivery of the rest? This is where speculation and logic intersect. If Ripple was willing to allocate billions to R3 and millions to early investors like Greg Kidd, then large-scale institutional deals weren't just possible. They were inevitable because no global liquidity solution would succeed without buy-in from the very banks and funds that dominate global flows. And those entities don't buy on exchanges with slippage. They negotiate contracts quietly. Fast forward to today. The launch of the first spot XRP ETF was a wake-up call. $24 million in trading volume in the first 90 minutes doesn't just happen by accident. That kind of volume means there was pent-up demand waiting for a compliant entry point. Wall Street analysts who dismissed XRP for years suddenly had to admit this wasn't just retail FOMO. Institutions were lining up, and the significance of this ETF goes beyond numbers. It sets precedent. Once the door is open, competitors will fight for their own ETFs. BlackRock, Fidelity, Vanguard, all of them know the money that's at stake. If Rex Osprey is allowed to dominate, it leaves the biggest players sidelined. That won't last, which means wave after wave of filings, approvals, and launches are on the horizon, each one another channel for institutional capital to pour in. But ETFs are just the tip of the iceberg. Let's circle back to DBS Bank and Franklin Templeton. When Asia's top bank teams up with one of America's largest investment managers and they both plug into Ripple infrastructure, you're not looking at an experiment. You're looking at a blueprint for how the next stage of global finance is going to work. Franklin Templeton already tokenized their US dollar short-term money market fund on the XRP ledger. That's not theory, that's live integration. And the scale of the money market sector, $7.3 trillion. If even a fraction of that shifts onto XRPL rails, the liquidity requirements alone are staggering. This is the kind of move that turns XRP from a speculative asset into a core utility asset, because once institutions see value flowing through a network, they want to be part of it, not because of hype, but because of necessity. If XRP becomes the standard for settlement and liquidity in tokenized assets, banks and funds won't have a choice. They'll need exposure. And once exposure becomes mandatory, accumulation goes into overdrive. Meanwhile, the conversation about market cap multipliers has sparked debate across the community. Analysts point out that in early Bitcoin days, every billion in capital inflows could multiply the market cap by 25x to 50x. That's how Bitcoin skyrocketed with relatively small inflows. XRP, with its thinner liquidity, can experience similar effects, at least in the short run. Small inflows create big price moves, but as liquidity deepens and the market matures, those multipliers naturally shrink. That's why Bitcoin's current multiplier is only around 3x to 5x. The lesson here isn't that XRP can't soar. It's that price mechanics evolve as assets grow. So yes, early-stage multipliers will be explosive. Billions flowing into a thin market can push XRP rapidly into double or even triple digits. But as volume expands and trillions settle in, the multiplier narrows. That's not bearish. It's just math. And it underscores the urgency of positioning early before liquidity soaks up the outsized gains. Let's not forget real estate tokenization either. Projects are already bringing thousands of properties onto the XRP ledger, representing billions in value. But the true revolution isn't just putting property titles on chain. It's when mortgages, loans, and entire capital structures migrate as well. Imagine a world where property financing, ownership transfer, and collateral are all executed instantly, transparently, and globally through XRPPL. That's not just innovation. It's disruption of one of the largest asset classes on Earth. And real estate is only one vertical. We're already seeing experiments in carbon credits, identity, supply chains, and central bank digital currencies. Every single one of those markets has multi-trillion-dollar potential, and every single one of them can run on top of XRP's infrastructure. That's the hidden story institutions are paying attention to, not the chatter of whether XRP is up 2% today or down 5% tomorrow. They're watching the architecture, the plumbing, the systems that could carry value across borders and industries without friction. So, when we hear speculation about BlackRock and JP Morgan secretly buying XRP, the real question isn't whether they've placed trades on exchanges. It's whether they already have allocations locked in. And given the history of pre-allocations, the movements of executives like Robbie Mitchnick, and the sudden spike in institutional activity around XRP, the odds aren't low. If anything, it fits the pattern perfectly. Because let's face it, When has Wall Street ever announced their accumulation plans ahead of time? They didn't with Bitcoin. They didn't with Ethereum. They quietly secured positions, launched funds, and then rolled out the marketing. XRP will be no different. The only difference is scale. With ETFs now open, with banks plugging into Ripple, and with multi-trillion-dollar industries testing XRPL, the stage is set for one of the largest accumulations we've ever seen. And here's the kicker. Retail often doesn't realize what's happening until it's too late. By the time headlines announce that institutions are now interested in XRP, positions will already be secured, allocations will already be locked, and prices will already be far above where they are today. That's how the cycle works every single time. As for the community itself, XRP holders have been through a war of patience, years of being called crazy, of enduring lawsuits, and of watching other tokens take the spotlight. But in many ways, that patience is paying off because while others chased hype, XRP's foundation was being laid in boardrooms, courtrooms, and backdoor negotiations. And now with ETFs live and partnerships breaking into trillions, the groundwork is bearing fruit. Think about the dominoes lined up right now. A spot ETF approved, institutional partnerships with Ripple, real estate, and money markets being tokenized, pre-allocation contracts already proven in the past. Add on top of that the global push for CBDCs and tokenized assets. The demand for neutral, efficient liquidity is about to skyrocket. And XRP isn't just in the conversation, it's at the center of it. When we talk about where XRP is heading, it's important to step outside the retail lens for a moment and see the bigger picture, the transformation of financial infrastructure worldwide. This isn't just about token prices, it's about a new set of rails for value. And if we're honest, most people still don't realize how deep that shift goes. Right now, we're seeing the rise of tokenized markets, not as theory, but as reality. Franklin Templeton tokenizing their US dollar short-term money market fund on the XRP ledger was a signal flare. That was a $7.3 trillion market moving onto blockchain rails. And the fact they chose XRPL tells you something powerful. It works, it scales, it integrates with existing systems, and above all, it solves real problems because that's the essence of XRP. It's not designed to be a speculative plaything. It was built to solve liquidity, settlement, and speed issues that traditional systems have struggled with for decades. Swift, while reliable, is slow, expensive, and not built for the tokenized age. XRP cuts through that friction in seconds. And when financial institutions see that advantage, they don't care about Twitter debates. They care about efficiency. Consider the CBDC movement. Central banks worldwide are actively exploring digital currencies. Some are already live in pilot programs, while others are deep into research. What do all of them have in common? They need interoperability. They need a neutral bridge asset to connect their national currencies without creating dominance or reliance on a single country system. That's exactly the role XRP was designed to play. Neutral, fast liquid, and global. This isn't just speculation. Ripple has already signed on to multiple CBDC projects across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. While details remain confidential in some cases, what we do know is that these pilots are laying the foundation for a world where value moves across borders the same way information moves across the internet today. And when that switch flips, the demand for liquidity will surge. XRP doesn't need to replace fiat, it simply needs to bridge it. Now layer in the rise of real-world asset tokenization beyond finance. Real estate, commodities, supply chain goods, even identity systems are being tested on blockchain. Every single one of those use cases requires a way to settle and exchange value seamlessly. That's where XRP steps in. The more industries tokenize, the more demand builds for fast, neutral settlement layers. And let's not overlook energy markets. Some of the earliest Ripple pilots involved energy companies exploring instant payments and settlements. Think about how massive that is. Energy is one of the largest markets on the planet. Trillions of dollars flowing every year. If XRP touches even a fraction of that volume, the effects ripple outward, pun intended, across the entire ecosystem. Meanwhile, the ETF market itself is about to explode. We saw what happened with Bitcoin ETFs. Once BlackRock filed, everyone piled in. Billions in inflows followed. The same pattern is beginning with XRP. Rex Osprey's ETF launch showed unprecedented demand, and Wall Street doesn't ignore signals like that. Expect wave after wave of filings, approvals, and product launches. Each one expands access. Each one legitimizes XRP further, and each one increases institutional participation. So, what does all of this mean for price? While we can't predict exact numbers, we can outline mechanics: thin liquidity plus new institutional demand, outsized price movement. As capital inflows deepen, those multipliers shrink. But by then, the asset has already repriced higher. That's why institutions move early. They don't wait until the multipliers are gone. They position ahead of time, quietly, and then ride the wave once liquidity matures. This is the cycle we're watching unfold. Retail debates while institutions allocate. And by the time headlines announce XRP is now mainstream, the positions are already secured. That's why the signs matter. Executives moving to BlackRock, Ripple partnerships with global banks, ETF launches breaking volume records, money markets tokenized on XRPL. These aren't random events. They are signals of a coordinated shift. And if you've been in the XRP community for years, this is exactly what you've been waiting for. The lawsuit era, the doubt, the endless comparisons to other coins, it all feels different now because suddenly the pieces are falling into place. The infrastructure is live, the partnerships are public, and the regulated investment products are here. The stage is set. The real question now isn't if XRP will integrate into the global system, it's how fast. And once that adoption curve accelerates, it won't be linear. It'll be exponential. One bank connects, then two, then a network of hundreds. One ETF launches, then 5, then a dozen. One money market tokenizes, then the entire sector follows. Each domino accelerates the next. And the irony is, while all of this is happening, many people will still dismiss it. They'll focus on daily charts, on noise, on distractions. But those who understand the architecture know exactly what's unfolding. This isn't a speculative play, it's the rewiring of global finance in real time. Now, picture the flow. CBDCs using XRP as a bridge. Money markets moving billions in daily settlements. Real estate tokenization shifting property financing onto Ledger. Supply chains settling instantly across borders. Energy companies leveraging real-time payments. And ETFs channeling institutional capital at scale. That's not a dream. That's a roadmap. And XRP is the common denominator. So when you hear whispers about JP Morgan or BlackRock secretly buying XRP, it doesn't sound far-fetched. It sounds obvious because for these players, waiting for confirmation is too late. They don't move after the crowd, they move before. And history shows us that by the time it's public, it's already priced in. Which brings us to today. ETFs are live, partnerships are announced, tokenization is here, the foundation is no longer being planned, it's being used. And if the first spot XRP ETF is already pulling in record-breaking volume, imagine what happens when the biggest asset managers join the race. The liquidity floodgates don't trickle open, they burst. And when that happens, the ecosystem shifts from speculative to structural. XRP stops being just another crypto and becomes the bridge asset it was always meant to be. Institutions won't frame it as hype. They'll frame it as necessity. And that's when the true repricing begins. The opportunity now lies in awareness, knowing what's happening behind the curtain before it becomes the headline. Seeing the signals, connecting the dots, and recognizing that this isn't a temporary wave. It's a systemic transformation. Every partnership, every ETF, every tokenized market is a brick in the foundation of a new financial architecture. And XRP is at the heart of it. So as we move forward, the question isn't whether XRP will rise. It's how high, how fast, and how broadly it integrates. Because once the rails are in place, once institutions are fully engaged, and once tokenization reaches critical mass, XRP won't just be part of the system. It will be the system's connective tissue. The story is still being written, but the trajectory is clear. And for those paying attention, the path ahead looks unlike anything we've seen before in financial history. If you want to go deeper and see exactly how all these pieces fit together, I put together something special just for you. The XRP Millionaire Blueprint. Inside, you'll get step-by-step documents, powerful infographics, and easy-to-follow videos that show you exactly how to position yourself for maximum XRP gains. The link is in the pinned comment below this.